Welcome to this week's live Ask an Investigator episode. As always, you can email your questions to our help desk, help@activeintel.com. You see the address on the screen. If you think of something during the broadcast, you can put those messages right into the screen through the help desk, and we'll pull it up and answer them in real time. Changes to the settings. We pulled up a few questions during the week from clients that we're going to start with. The first one has to do with searching corporate records. What happens a lot of times if a client has some type of a fraud or like an online scam and they need to find out who is behind a corporation or fraud, there's certain methods of looking that up. And we're going to take it a little deeper than just an online search or a electronic search to find more information about a particular corporate entity. That'll be our first question. Looks like we have another question from Steven about doing background criminal investigations. We'll get to that second. And again, if you have other questions, you can email our help desk. So let's start with corporate investigations. Corporations are formed at the state level in the U.S. In most states, it's done by the Secretary of State. So if there's a corporation, whether it's an LLC, a C Corp, an Inc., a partnership, any kind of entity of formulation that's not an individual, will typically be registered with the Secretary of State in that state. A corporation may have entities in multiple states. If they're doing business in other states, sometimes they have to form a corporation in multiple states. Sometimes they'll even have a main corporation as a parent and then subsidiaries or DBAs in other states. In any case, getting records from as many states as possible is helpful. And here's the reason why. And we'll show some examples on the screen here momentarily. In some cases, a state requires for an out-of-state resident more detailed information in the corporate records than the home state. So if you're looking for who are the individuals behind a corporation and you look just in their home state, you may find a PO box or the corporate address, whereas if you search in another state, you may find home addresses and even more detailed lists of individuals behind the corporation. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull up an example of a record search in the Secretary of State. This will happen to be in Florida. Most states have very similar lookups. In some cases, you actually have to go in person to the Secretary of State. In some cases, you have to mail in requests to the Secretary of State. But most government agencies who form corporations, whether it's a Secretary of State or Corporations Division, will have this same scenario. So let's take a look and see how that comes together. So if you're in a typical browser, you do a search. We're going to just do a search from scratch for Florida corporations, right? And this is done through the Division of Corporations, Secretary of State. And here's their website. Let's make it a little bit smaller so it's easier to see. If you're looking to search for a business, popular task, look up a business right there, right? In most of these search screens, you can search by many different criteria. The name of the corporation, by officer or registered agent, trademark name, tax ID number, document number, even street address, and that can come in handy later. So let's take a look by searching for corporate name, and that's what the name means here. And we're going to pick a fictitious company, XYZ corporation. We'll just do XYZ and we'll see what comes up. Well, there's a bunch of XYZ, XYZ Inc., XYZ Corporation, Limited Partnership. Many of them are inactive, and we'll probably pick one of those for now just to kind of give us some examples. Here is an XYZ Corporation that was filed in 2013. This one's showing active. So let's pick one that's inactive. XYZ Corp. That's a cross-reference. I'm going to pick one in particular that will have certain types of records so we can kind of go through it in depth of what the records would be. We may have to go back to that active one. And I'm doing this on the fly. I could have loaded this up in advance, but I want to show you exactly how it's done in real life. Okay, here's one that's inactive. This one's XYZ Antiques Corporation. It was filed in 2003. The current status is inactive. And the reason it's inactive is dissolution for annual report. Basically what that means is they did not file their annual report for a year that was needed, and that happened in 2007. So for a few years, they filed annual reports. In 2007, it was deleted. The important information from the data, and we're going to look at documents afterwards, but in the data is going to be the principals of that corporation. They're going to be the registered agent and the officer. So the registered agent is the official contact person for that corporation. And remember, this is a generic lookup. These people are not involved with anything. It's just kind of a name that we pulled out of thin air. So these people have nothing to do with any ongoing investigation or any type of activity. We just pulled it up randomly. But these are public records, right? So the registered agent is every corporation has to designate a person who can receive official notices, lawsuits, subpoenas, judgments, notifications of records. And that registered agent can also be an officer, but they can be somebody different as well. A lot of times, out-of-state corporations will designate a registered agent in the state to receive their notices. And registered agents, you can actually purchase registered agent service from online companies. So be aware that this may not be somebody officially related to the company, but it is somebody you want to know about. And then there's officers. There's president, vice president, there could be a secretary, and the different abbreviations will reference what that person is in the corporation as far as an officer title. The titles aren't crucially important, but the more the better, because they have more contact people. And you also want to look at the addresses. In this case, all of the officers have the same address, right? And this is probably the corporate address. Yep, the mailing address for the corporation. If you notice, the registered agent is different. Okay, this is a street address in Miami Lakes versus Miami. It is one of the officers, right? What it probably means is that this is a business address where the corporation exists. This may be a residence address or a home address. And the reason why that may have had to be done is a registered agent has to maintain normal business hours when they can receive notices or subpoenas. And if for some reason at the time, maybe when this company was closing up, they weren't going to be at this business address every day, the person put in their home address. This could be helpful later in an investigation. So now you're going to document all this. If you're running an investigation, you want to take all these names, addresses, and put those into some type of a document, spreadsheet, Word document, anything that you can save them for later to cross-reference. Even the dates you want to cross-reference. Okay. And then you're going to look at the different years. There were 4 reports. You can see view image. The original domestic profit, that means that this was the original filing for that corporation. And every year they filed a new annual report. So they filed a corporation in 2003. They did an annual report 4 years in a row. So let's take a look at each one of these and see what might be available in these reports. Here's the first filing. You notice it has a stamp from the Secretary of State in Tallahassee. It has a payment amount. It has what date that happened. It was March of 2003. There may be special instructions. You want to look at that to see if there's anything of use there. And also look at these stray marks. Sometimes these forms are filled out by an accountant, by an attorney, by a bookkeeper, and there may be information on these stray marks on the document. Here is the official filing. This was done by Lazarus Corporate Filing Services. So XYZ Antiques hired a corporate filing service to prepare this document for them. A corporation can prepare their own filing documents, but sometimes if you're not familiar with it or just for convenience, you may want to hire a company to do it. You notice it's handwritten. It's not typed. You want to keep a copy of this to see if this handwriting matches up other handwriting. There's some unique characters of this handwriting. The way they did the Q, the C has a unique little curve on it. It'll give you what was checked off or what type of filing for profit, nonprofit, LLC. And then it'll have the articles of corporation. This looks like it was a form document that maybe this corporate filing company had, and they just hand wrote in, what's the name of the corporation? XYZ, principal place of business, 5521 Northwest 74th Avenue. It wasn't specifically typed for this company. Again, handwritten. Now, if you look, name and address of the initial registered agent. Gonzalo Ocampo, that's one of the principals, and has a different address, an apartment. So a lot of times when people form a corporation, it's in advance of renting commercial space or actually opening up a business. So they may have put their home address there, right? Where they may change it later. We'll probably see on other documents, they may have changed this address, but it's good to keep track of what addresses you see on these original filings, because sometimes the only address they have is their home address. So you can find out maybe where the person might live, or at least where they lived at that time. Okay. So this will give you some information that may not be in the data. That's why we want to look at the documents, not in the data. Remember, this 100 Kings Point Drive, apartment 1406, that was not in any of the data. So if you're just going to do a quick data search and take the easy way out, you're not going to have this information. This is where an investigator will look for additional records. The incorporator, same thing, 100 Kings Point Drive. It has a signature. The president, vice president, and treasurer, that's what the T was for treasurer, 3 names. They look like they're the same names on the original file, or on the final filing, but you notice this Gloria Patricia Vera, that might be a maiden name. We're going to take a look at that. You want to, again, type all these names into a document corresponding to the year. Registered agent signature, and so there's a 3-page filing of the initial corporation. So let's take a look at the next year, 2004. You have to do an annual report. Annual report, by definition, is annual, meaning you have to do it every year. So here's their annual report for 2004 on the form. Again, it's part of it's handwritten, but there's a new registered agent. The old registered agent was Gonzalo Ocampo. Now there's Gloria Patricia Ocampo. Well, we saw that name, Gloria Patricia Vera was the treasurer. So this could be a maiden name. Now that person is the registered agent. The officers have changed. The president was Hazem Tassin. Now the president is Gonzalo Ocampo. The vice president was Gonzalo Ocampo. They basically switched. And then the treasurer basically was a name change from Gloria P. Vera to Gloria Patricia Ocampo. So now you have a lot more information about names. The middle initial, now you have a full middle name. You also have a signature of that person. This looks like a different address than we saw before. 4352 Northwest 109th Place in Doral. That wasn't an address we had before. So now we have a business address, a residence, another residence, and maybe a third residence on the final report. A phone number. Look at this. On the document, you have a phone number, 305-887-5500. That could be a business line. It could be a cell phone. You want to write that down too. You want to track all of the changes. Let's take a look at 2005 and see what shows up in 2005, if anything has changed. Again, the Secretary of State will send you this form pre-printed with most of the information, giving you the opportunity to change anything that needs to be changed, right? The registered agent is the same, but the address looks like it's different. Maybe there was a typo. This says 4362. The written address is 4352. Again, you want to write that down and keep track of when that change happened to see if they actually moved or there was a typo on the original one. You also want to look at dates. This filing was done in May of 05. It's also good to keep track of when the filing was done. Was it done early or last minute? That could give you an idea of organizational structure, who's working on it. Is it an accountant? Other money problems? Did they wait till the last minute? Make note of the FEI number. That's like the Social Security number for a business. That's their tax ID number. Make a note of that. Again, you have a signature and a phone number. Phone number looks like it's the same one. So let's take a look at the last filing for 2006. A little bit different format, but basically the same thing. Addresses are the same, 5521, 109th Place. We've seen that one. Here's another address, 8959 Northwest 178th Lane, Miami Lakes. Right? That's an address I don't think we've seen before. You don't have to sign all the forms if you do it online. So here we have, if you just looked at the data, some people just look at, okay, the corporate information, I could just do it on an internet search and have everything I need. Well, if you take it further and look at all of these documents, you will find things like phone numbers, signatures, prior addresses, maiden names, middle names. And once you have those, if you took all this information as we were reviewing it, we went through it real fast. We didn't do this in depth. And put it into a spreadsheet or some kind of database, now you have a bigger picture of who these people are. Now what you could do is, let's do it here. The phone number, which is 887-5500, area code 305. Let's do a Google search on that, 305 887-5500. Right? Let's see what that comes back to. Okay, in Florida, XYZ Antiques closed. All right, we kind of know about that. Their Yelp review, right? 5521 74th Avenue, we know about that. Maybe they have some reviews. There was no reviews here. But if you reverse search that phone number that we found in the filing, we may find things like a Yelp review or a Google review, and it might have a person reviewing it. It might say Joe Schmo said, yeah, this is a great place. Well, maybe you can contact Joe Schmo and ask them, when did you go there? What was it like? Who was working there? Maybe some of the reviews are insiders. Sometimes people have friends and relatives put their own reviews. Maybe if you do a reverse search on this, you'll find a social media page, Facebook, Google, Instagram, Twitter. And those will have people who have liked or followed that group. And some of those could be relatives or friends. Let's take a look at an address, if there is one. If you notice, the address has changed at the end. 5521 Northwest 78th Ave. Let's go into maps. Let's do it the old-fashioned way. 5521 Northwest 74th Ave. Let's look at it in maps. It's showing now there's Aurora Mechanical Contractor, Inc. That's who's at that address. So when the company closed, it was an antique company. It looks like Aurora Mechanical Contractors moved in there. Well, let's take a look at Aurora Mechanical Contractors just for fun to see what happens here. Do another search. If it'll let us. Okay. Entity name, Aurora Mechanical Contractors. Here it is right here, active corporation. Looks like that address is pretty good, 5521 Northwest 74th Avenue. The reason we're going to do this is to see if any of the officers are the same. Maybe this company closed and they started doing something else. Maybe they're in a different business now. It looks like this is just a new company that rented the same space, which is fine, right? This is a very normal thing to have happened. But if we go back to this, let's look at the president, Gonzalo Ocampo. Let's do a search by officer. Okay. Ocampo. Gonzalo. Well, here's what we got. We have XYZ Trading, XYZ Antiques. We also have Pink Panther Export Boutique, Spare Parts and Equipment. And again, there may be more than one person with the same name. But if you're wanting to see maybe what, we don't have a middle initial here, maybe if it's the same person, Pink Panther Export Boutique kind of sounds like trading and antique. So let's take a look at this company. This is also inactive. This was a prior company, 1982. Could it be the same person? Maybe, right? It was close by. It was in Pompano Beach, so it was in the same general vicinity. So maybe they had this company beforehand. Let's see what else. International Spare Parts and Equipment, 1987. Gonzalo Ocampo might be the same person. Again, close by Coral Springs in Miami. Same type of business, but different address. Let's say MGR Trading, 1999, also in Miami, Dade County, Cooper City. So, but now you have another address. Well, let's just see if we can tell anything from one of the filings, if it's the same person. How will we do that? Well, if there's a signature, Gonzalo Ocampo, how does that signature look? Let's take a look at this one. Well, that looks pretty much the same to me, right? On an angle like that with a big swirl. May have changed over time. This is 1999. So now we know that this person had another company. And again, there's nothing illegitimate about this. This is just tracking down companies called MJR Trading. And they had that company. Let's take a look. In 1999 to 2000, they only had it 1 year in Cooper City, Rocking Horse Road. Who knows what that is? Is that a business? Is that an individual residential address? Let's plug that address in. That looks like it's a house, right? So it has Zillow and Redfin listings. So now just in maybe 10 or 15 minutes with some very basic searching, we have found the history of this potential company. And again, there's nothing wrong with this company. They didn't do anything wrong. We just picked XYZ as a random type of search. And we've located signatures, addresses, maybe colleagues of this person. You know, when they formed this corporation, there were other incorporators. These are all the names, besides Gonzalo Ocampo, of other people that were involved with this corporation. The other three, if you notice, were out of the country in Venezuela, right? So just in this very small search, we've gathered and created a great deal of information to go by. We could take it further. We could run vehicle, run real estate records checks on all these addresses to see if they ever owned them. Are there deeds? Are there mortgages? Are there liens? Are there other owners? And we can spider this out any number of ways. So this is how a corporation search is, and it's basically the same logic to use for any kind of record. You don't want to just go into the data. Here's data. Okay, this is great. Detailed by officer, registered agent, dates, data. You can cut and paste this all day long. But unless you start looking at these documents and seeing what's on there, phone numbers, signatures, handwriting, another signature, dates, every address, you're not going to have anything to go on. And this is how an investigation is done. Take these addresses and spider them deeper. Run the address, right? 4352 Northwest 109th Place. Well, guess what? We saw before, we can search by address. Search by address. Let's take a look at that one again. 4352 109th Place, right? 4352 Northwest 109th Place. Let's see what shows up there. No records found. Okay, so there probably are no current corporations there. But this is an example of where you can spider it just within this one source. We haven't looked at real estate records. We haven't looked at vehicle records. We haven't looked at criminal records. We haven't looked at any other kind of records other than corporate. And we found a large range of individuals. Let's look one more time at Ocampo by officer. See if there's anything that's current. It's hard to tell from this here. Cooley Court. I kind of think we might have seen that address. This is Lake Worth. A little bit farther north. May or may not be the same person. Pool company. Some of these sound a little bit different. Outdoor lighting, building company, maybe a different person. This has a middle initial S, which we have not seen. Florida Friendly Services. Let's see that one. This is 2008. Wait, Cooley Court, Lake Worth. Irrigation and lighting. So now we have a cross-reference from an address, which is Cooley Court, to there's actually a corporation called Cooley Court LLC. Sounds like a property management company. Again, it may not be the same Gonzalo Ocampo. You want to look at signatures. Well, let's do that real quick right now. Let's see if there's a signature on this form. There's not. Let's see if there's a signature on one of the other forms. No signature. So there's nothing on these to verify to see if it's the same Gonzalo Ocampo. This one's in Stewart, which is a little farther north in Miami, but Delray Beach is closer. So there may be some overlap, maybe a relative with the same name. Let's see. Let's just look at one more. Pool Butler. Lake Worth, 2010. Let's look at the name change. What was the name change before? Irrigation and lighting. See if there's a signature. Do we get a signature? We do. Here we go. Gonzalo Ocampo. That's a different signature. So we've kind of determined that these other records are a different Gonzalo Ocampo with the S middle initial. But we do know that the Spare Parts, Pink Panther, XYZ probably are the same person. Again, spidering out those addresses, the names, phone numbers, there may be a number of things that could be found. So that's just one little rabbit hole of corporate records that can be used to find all kinds of information about, if you have an online company that you're not sure who it is behind the company, maybe you sent money to somebody that they're not returning calls or returning your investment. Maybe there's a company that you're not sure if they're related to somebody else. You can do the same kind of cross-reference. These corporate records, especially the documents, this is the most important thing. Look at these documents. right? Especially the first one. The first one is a free form record that was created by the company XYZ Antiques. They either typed this up or had somebody type it up, and they had to handwrite part of it. There's an old address here, and then you can see chronologically how they changed it every year when they got their notice in the mail. This is pre-printed by Secretary of State, and you can handwrite any changes. Those changes are very useful to use the chain of address changes or the chain of people involved. If some people dropped out, that might be a good contact person. If there was a person who was a secretary or treasurer and they all of a sudden weren't part of the company anymore after a few years, you might want to contact that person. They may be a good source of information because they may not be currently associated with the company and may be willing to give you some information. Again, the people involved that we see these names, there's not nothing sketchy about these people, and they're not doing anything wrong. It's just random corporations that we saw. So this is a good example of how to use corporate records that can help you develop more info. So we're going to switch gears here momentarily and take a look at background investigations. So how can you do criminal records? This is what Stephen was asking about. It's the same type of idea, although criminal records have two layers. One is the state and one is the local. So if somebody is arrested or convicted, they're going to have records of that arrest event. They're going to have records of the court event, and they're going to have records of their final disposition, if they were sentenced or convicted or whatever the case was. And each one of those records will be helpful to find out what were the steps taken, who else was involved, were there attorneys, were there co-defendants, were there witnesses, there'll be documents. So we're going to take a quick break for probably 2 or 3 minutes. I'm going to pull up on the screen some criminal records to look through, and then we'll talk about those just like we did with the corporate records. So stand by briefly. The screen will stay on. Again, if you have questions, you can email them, but you'll see the screen will change to criminal records, and we'll talk about those briefly. Okay, we're back. I pulled up some searches for criminal records. We also just picked Miami-Dade County just to make it easy in the same area. So here is the screen for Miami-Dade County. I put in a random name through the search system of Joe Smith. And again, there's probably a lot of Joe Smith, as you'll see. We're not picking on any one particular person. We're just using it as an example. You'll see first I'll pull up the old corporate info. It'll switch to the other screen here briefly. There's a lot of Joe Smith entries on this form. Let's add the screen share. Chrome tab. Here we go. There we go. As you can see, there's a number of Joe Smiths, very common name. So we're going to take a look into date opened and closed, hearings, dockets. This is an important thing to look at. This is a record of all the events. There was a judge assigned, a case assigned, judgment and sentence for this person, and it'll give you a book and page. And what can happen is you can actually look up that book and page and get printout of the dockets that'll show you exactly what the court event was. The important reason to do this is because criminal records are notorious for having similar names of parties. If you have a person named Joe Smith, how do you know it's not a different Joe Smith? In the docket, many times it'll have their date of birth, it'll have driver's license numbers, it'll have street addresses you can cross-reference. So a criminal record lookup is not a Google database search where you push a button and it pops up on your screen. You actually have to go into these corporate records and look at the papers to see.
This came back from a search.
Sounds like Google is thinking I'm talking to her. It will see what events happened and give you information about who the individual was. If there's a common name, Joe Smith, there could be more than one person with that name, even with the same date of birth. So you want to look at these docket records, these files, to see if there's details that can point you to the right direction. Many times people have heard of the phrase, well, I want to do a FBI background search. Well, that's great. You can do an FBI background search if you're the FBI. There's no national criminal record search that can be done by a private individual that covers the whole country. You have to search it by state, by county, by city, because a person's criminal records are contained at that local level. Unless it's a federal crime, that'll be in the federal court system. But the reason that's important is, let's say this person, Joe Smith, right, that we know about, if they were convicted of a federal crime in federal court, it would not appear in this Miami-Dade lookup. So if you know that they lived in Miami-Dade or lived in Florida, you first want to look at the records there, then look at the federal record. So the criminal record search is a process of looking at all the different layers of criminal jurisdictions: city, county, state, federal. If it's near any kind of Native American, there could be Indian reservation records, but that's pretty rare. You want to look at all of them to make sure you're encompassing all the records. Sometimes there's private databases that can be searched that'll help point in the right direction. You know, things like LexisNexis, TLO, other types of records that will at least point you in the right direction, but it won't have all the information. It'll just give you places you might want to look at the local level. The other thing you want to look up, and we're not going to dive into it here, is once you get this book and page of this docket number, find out where the arresting jurisdiction was. This is Miami-Dade County. Maybe they were arrested in Homestead or in Miami Beach. If you get the arrest records from that police agency that originally did the arrest or the warrant, that will have other information on it about the address where they were arrested, the address on the driver's license that you can verify to make sure it's the right party. Because you don't want to take action with criminal records on a person unless you know exactly that it's the right person that you're looking for. So that's a brief overview of an investigation on criminal records, how it works. We went more in depth on the corporate, but since it's running towards the amount of time we want to do for a live video, we'll leave it there for now. Remember, every week we're going to do another live Ask an Investigator video. So if you have questions, you can email them anytime during the week. We'll pull them up and we'll look at them for the video. And if it's something that's live that comes up, we can do it in real time and pull up records for that person. So we appreciate you seeing another episode of our live investigator videos. Keep track of this channel. They'll come up once a week, usually midweek like this. And if you have any questions, you can reach us through our websites at activeintel.com or teleclient.com. And you can reach our help desk